Hello, class. This is Mr. Kreisler, and today we will be learning about how do we rationalize a denominator with complex numbers. For those of you who have forgotten, complex numbers are just numbers and terms that deal with I. So before we start the do now, if you're watching it on EdTPA, it'll pause automatically. If you're watching it elsewhere, pause the video and try the do now yourself. All right, so hopefully you all have gotten these correct, and I'm going to go through the do now myself. So for the do now, we have distribute the following. So right now we're going to say distribute, which means to multiply to all terms. So we're going to take this negative 2i and multiply by the 5, and take the negative 2i and also multiply it by this negative 3i. So negative 2 times 5 is going to be negative 10. The I you can't multiply by anything, so it's just going to kind of chill here. Now we have a negative 2 times a negative 3. So negative times negative is going to be positive. 2 times 3 is 6. Now the I has an I to multiply by. We add the exponents. They both have that invisible 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So we have 6i squared. Now we have to make sure we remember our rules of I. I cannot have an exponent greater than 2. We know when I has an exponent greater than 2, that it becomes something else. So I squared is really equal to negative 1. So what we're really saying here is negative 1 times a positive 6. And we can just bring this negative 10i down if we want. And a positive times a negative is negative 6. And a negative 10i is still here. Now, if you got in this step and you thought this was your final answer, you're almost there. We have to remember, though, our correct order, or our a plus bi form, which just means that the one with the I has to go last. And the I has to have an exponent of 1. Like I said, anything greater than 1, we have to affix this. So let's bring that negative 10i to the second spot. And we're going to bring this negative 6 to the front. And this will be our final answer for number 1. Hopefully you guys got that all correct. Take a pause. If you want for yourself, the video will pause after we do the second part of the do now automatically. All right, for the second part of the do now, we have multiply by its conjugate. So the first thing here is, well, look at this, 6i plus 5. As we just discussed in the first part of the do now, this is not in the proper a plus bi form. So our first step is going to be, well, you're going to be like, well, Mr. Kreisler, I know that the I has to go second, so let's move that positive 5 to the front, and this positive 6i, so positive is plus, to the back. Now we have to remember, what is a conjugate? Well, a conjugate really is just these same two terms, right? With the same number, the only difference is we're changing this middle sign. So the positive 5 stays positive, but now this plus 6i becomes a minus 6i. Now we're going to multiply. So when we multiply, we distribute. So I'm saying I'm taking this 5, and I'm going to multiply it by this 5. And I'm going to take this 5 and multiply it by that negative 6i. And let's do this step first. So 5 times 5, hopefully we know, is 25. 5 times negative 6 becomes a negative 30. We got the I there, so negative 30i. And as we distributed everything for the 5. Now let's move forward to distributing the positive 6i. So positive 6 times 5 is going to be a positive 30i. Then we have a positive 6i times a negative 6i. So positive times negative is negative 36, because 6 times 6 is 36. And we have this I times this I, right? And what is I times I? Well, we're adding the exponents of 1 plus 1, so I squared. What is beautiful about conjugates is right here. We have a negative 30 and a positive 30. So we have the same numbers with the same variable, so same coefficients, same variables, but the signs are opposite. Well, negative 30 plus 30 gonna cancel out. So let's just bring down this 25 because there's nothing we're doing with it just yet. And then look what we got here. We got an I squared. And as we went over in problem 1 of the do now, oops, I squared becomes this negative 1. So we're saying negative 36 times negative 1. And this beauty right here can become positive 36. Because negative times negative is positive. Final step, we're simply just going to combine our 25 plus 36, which is going to give us an answer of 61. And that's it for the do now. All right, the video is going to pause if you're on if you're on the Ed puzzle, and just give me give me a thumbs up or thumbs down or yes or no if you understood it or not. All right, moving on to the new lesson. So here's our keywords and concepts for rationalizing the denominator. What does that mean? Well, a way to make the fraction have a real number in the denominator instead of an imaginary number. Essentially, we're just trying to get rid of the I in the bottom or in the denominator. We do not like imaginary denominators because they are difficult to visualize / work with. This is like when we were trying to divide by a radical. Dividing by imaginary numbers is really hard to imagine. Like, what would be 5 divided by I? I don't know. But if we rationalize it and get rid of this, it'll make it a lot easier to visualize that number. So here's our example. We have a 2 over a negative 5 plus 3. Well, as we mentioned in the do now, we do not like this right here. The I is first. So what we have to first do is change it into a plus bi form. And as you see over here, I changed it for you guys. So the 3 moved to the back, the negative 5, sorry, the 3 moved to the front, not the back, and the negative 5, I moved to the back. Now we have to multiply the numerator, which is the top number and top terms, and the denominator, this bottom term. And we have to do that by the conjugate. So right here, this is our conjugate. And we're simply multiplying it to get rid of this bottom imaginary number. And by having the same number in terms on top divided by the same number of terms on bottom, we're basically saying we're multiplying this whole thing by 1. So if we were to go back to the original, it's basically saying this times a 1. And as you all know, if we multiply something by 1, it doesn't change anything. So it's just like multiplying the equation by 1. So now I'm going to get rid of my marks on this, and I'll do the multiplication with you guys. So right now, what we're saying here is we got a 2. Let's just do the top part first, the numerator. 2 times 3 plus 5i. So 2 times 3, which gives you the 6. And a 2 times a 5i, which gives you a 10i. Now we're going to multiply the bottom. I use a different color for that so it's easier to see. So it became this. So now we have 3 minus 5i times 3 plus 5i. Well, 3 times 3 would be 9. And 3 times 5i is plus 15i. Now that we multiplied everything with the 3, we're going to move on to the negative 5. So we're taking the negative 5 now. And we're saying that times 3, which is negative 15i. And negative 5 times positive 5i, which is negative 25i squared. Our middle terms, positive 15 and negative 15i, cancel out. this negative 25 right here is going to become a positive 25 because I squared is negative, negative times negative is positive. Bring down the 9, and 9 plus 25 gives us this beautiful 34. That is right here. And anytime you guys are stuck, rewind the video or pause it so it's easier for you to understand. All right, I'm going to erase this now. And we're going to talk about our last part. And now for our last part, we're going to do something called simplify. And I say if necessary, we cannot always simplify it. But what we're saying here is 6, 10, and 34. What can we divide them all by? So what number can we divide them by? If you remember your prime numbers, you could break down all these numbers and see what prime numbers they have in handy, have in common. And if we work through it, we would notice that 6, 10, and 34 can all be divided by 2. So we are going to divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 34 divided by 2 is 17. And that would be our answer in simplest form. Now, is it in the correct order? Yes, the I is second. And we're in A plus BI form on the top. And on the bottom, there are no I's. So we are done here. I'm going to pause the video. You're going to answer a question, and then we're going to move on to some practice. All right. Let's do the we try. Try it by yourself, and then just work through it with me. So the video is going to pause again. You can try it by yourself. All righty. So now we have another where we're rationalizing the denominator. So first things first, we have to put this in the right order. So nothing's going to happen with this 4. It's just going to chill up here. The negative 3 is going to come forward. And the positive 6i is going to come back. Now we have to multiply by the conjugate, which just means we're going to change this sign right here. So instead of a positive, it's going to be a negative 6i. And we're multiplying both the top and the bottom by this negative 3 times negative 6i. Once again, we do not change the sign of the number in front, just the one in back or the middle sign. So we're going to take this 4, multiply it by negative 3, gives us a negative 12. 4 times negative 6i, which is going to give us a negative 24i. Now there's no more work to do with the numerators. We're just going to leave it as it is and now move on to the denominator. If there's something to do on top, not for this lesson, but in the future, you want to do one step at a time so you don't confuse yourself. So let's do the bottom. So now we have negative 3 that we're going to distribute and multiply, which is negative 3, which becomes a positive 9. Negative 3 times a negative 6i, which becomes a positive 18i. Now we're going to move on to the positive 6i, multiply that by the negative 3 as well. This becomes negative 18i, and positive 6i times negative 6i, which becomes a negative 36i squared. I times I is I squared. Once again, we're multiplying by a conjugate, so these middle terms cancel out, positive 18i and negative 18i. Did you notice what else we have to do? I hope you did, because the other thing that we still have to worry about over here is that, well, what do I do about this negative 36i squared? Can't leave I squared like this. I has to be to the first. So I squared is equal to -1, and a negative times a negative becomes positive 36. Nothing's going on with that 9. So do 9 plus 36. And our numerator is going to stay as it is. Nothing happened with it yet. Now we can look at the bottom and see, well, we can add those numbers. So let's make that more simple and combine. So -12 minus 24i over, well, 9 plus 36 simply gives us a 45. Now for our very last step, we have to say, well, what could I simplify all three of these numbers by? Or what's a number that I could divide all three by? Hopefully you're able to figure it out, and we can simplify by 3. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. 24 divided by 3 is 6. And 45 divided by 3 is 15. So that all works. So our final answer, this is negative still, so -4 minus our 6i over 15. If you're stuck, rewind the video, watch again, follow my steps. If you're good, we're going to move forward. So this one you're going to try on your own. Video is going to pause and you practice. All right, so hopefully you guys were able to solve this all on your own, following the steps as we did in the previous slide. If not, we're going to work through it together anyway. So first things first, this is in the wrong order. So what we're going to say is, let's switch this around. So the 6 stays at 6. This -7 comes forward, and positive 5i goes to the back. Now we're simply going to multiply by the conjugate. So the conjugate of our denominator, we're just changing that middle sign. So now it's -7 minus 5i. So the positive became a negative over for the 5 over -7 minus 5i. That way we're multiplying essentially by 1. We're not changing the problem. We're just making it easier to look at. Distribute and multiply the top. So 6 times -7, which is our -42. And 6 times -5, which is our -30i. Moving on to the denominator, we're multiplying and distributing again. So -7 times -7 is a 49. And -7 times -5, which is going to be a positive, guess what? A positive 35i. Distribute the 5i. Now we have a positive times a negative, so it's -35i. And positive 5 times -5, -25, I times I squared. Nothing to do with that numerator. That's why we left it, but these are going to cancel out. Same numbers, but different signs. This right here is going to become a -1 times a -25, so positive 25. Bring down that 49. Top doesn't change. Add the bottom. And we get this over 74. Last step, simplify. What is the number we can divide these all by? Oh, we can simplify it by 2. So divide these numbers by 2. So -42 divided by 2 is -21. -30 divided by 2 is -15i. And 74 divided by 2 is a positive 37. And this right here, this is your final answer. All right, I hope you guys were able to understand the lesson. Feel free to ask me questions. And check out the classwork that is based on this lesson. We'll have another video up tomorrow, and the classwork will be due after that. Hope you all are doing well during this time. Stay safe. Mr. Kreisler's out.